So I am Dr. Peggy Parker, and I am a naturopath and a European biological medicine physician. And so there's a little difference between those. I am what I would call a perpetual 3-year-old. So for any of you who are parents and had a 3-year-old or have a 3-year-old, you know, they always ask why. They got to know the answer to everything. Well, that's been me my whole life. So once I finished my naturopathic degree, I realized that I still didn't know why people were getting sick and what I could do to heal that, you know, to help their bodies heal themselves. I didn't want to just throw herbs and things like that at them, just like Western medicine throws pills. I wanted to get to the root cause of the problem and see if we could do something about it. So I was fortunate enough to find a doctor who is from Switzerland. His name is Dr. Thomas Rau, and he was teaching classes in the United States on European biological medicine. And lo and behold, that was exactly the premise of European biological medicine, is that you look for the source of the problem. You treat the source of the problem and not just the symptoms of the problem. So I was very excited. So my perpetual 3-year-old self went from being just a naturopath to getting an advanced degree in European biological medicine. And it was so fortuitous because it helped me understand ionized water in a way that lots of people didn't understand it, especially back in 2005 when I first got my first Enagic machine. and there wasn't really any information available to us. And so I just started researching. Researching. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I'm going to make it pretty brief. Some of you have heard it before and some of you haven't. But I had an inpatient medical spot in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I live in Spokane, Washington, and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is only 30 miles away. So it's, you know, kind of an easy commute. But I had an office manager who embezzled all my money. And so I had to close my clinic down. And at the same time that happened, there are a lot of things were going on. And I started getting sick. I am not a person who needs a nap. That's just, I'm kind of the Energizer Bunny type. And so I was so exhausted and I felt kind of queasy. And I just chalked it up to stress. Like, this is all so stressful. I'm having to go through bankruptcy. I'm having to close my clinic. I'm having to do all these things. And my dog got cancer and I had to put him down. So it was a really terrible time. So I just chalked it up to that. But I just kept getting worse and worse. And I set an appointment with my holistic MD, but it was way, 6 weeks out. During that 6 weeks, I got so sick. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And then one day I got a referred pain in my back of my shoulder blade. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my gallbladder. I'd better go to the emergency room. And so they took a sonogram. They told me to come back in the morning for surgery. But when I tried to get out of bed in the morning, I couldn't because I was in so much pain. I had to wait for my son to get home he worked a night job at FedEx, sorry. And he had to pick me up out of bed and carry me down the stairs, put me in the car, take me to the hospital. And I was begging them not to take out my gallbladder, just put a drain in it or something. Well, when they got in there and they touched it, it exploded because it was gangrenous. That's why I was so sick. And they didn't get all the gangrene out. And so I was literally rotting from the inside out. And I had no energy. I couldn't move. I couldn't be out of bed for more than a few minutes at a time. I was crawling to the bathroom. And I was trying every naturopathic and European biological medicine trick there is. And I was not getting better. And a friend of mine who lives in Seattle kept talking to me about a water ionizer. And I just dismissed her because she's kind of like one of those health ADD people. She's always on to the new thing. And I had tried ionized water before. I used to have used to be called a Singer machine, and then they changed the name to a Kai. And I tried it in my clinic, and my patients didn't have good results, and nobody liked it. It tasted terrible. And so I just dismissed what she had to say. But I kept being sick, and she kept talking to me. So one day I finally succumbed, and I got somebody to drive me over to Seattle. It's a pretty far drive, like 4.5 hours. And I went to a demo, and there was a man there from Japan. So there was a lot of translation going on. So during the 3.5 to 4 hours that I was there, I drank 4 16-ounce glasses of water from a commercial machine from the, I can't think of the name of that all of a sudden. It just floated in my head. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. And every single symptom I had disappeared. And it stayed gone for 2 full days. So I knew there was something that I needed to know about this. But my brain was still foggy from being sick. And I went home and I kept thinking about it. And then, I think I figured it out. So I went back the next week and bought a machine. And I didn't have any money. I was going through bankruptcy, the whole thing. But I couldn't be sick anymore. So I did it. And when I got home, I arranged for 10 of all of my old patients and that were 60 years old or older. Now I'm past 60, but back then I was younger. But because once you hit a certain point, your body the healing process slows down a little. And so I wanted to give this machine a run for its money, because back in those days, you had a 30-day money back guarantee, no questions asked. So I was going to try this baby out. So I did a bunch of tests and I got some pretty remarkable results. And I'm going to share some of those with you tonight. And it took me some time. I had to think and think and think. It took me months, really, because the focus of my training and the focus of the message about the machine was kind of in the wrong place. And it took my brain a while to uncover it. And so that's why I want to share it with you, because it was so important. It was such a big moment for me. So then I started teaching all kinds of people at Enagic. And in 2009, that's when I met Johnny Zoukopoulos, who spoke a little bit last week, because I had committed that I wanted to train at least 1,000 people that year. And so I traveled all over the United States, and I went up into Canada and got to train lots of people. It was really a busy year, but it was really fantastic. So I want to share, I want to kind of distill down some of the things and show you some of the things I've learned since then, so that you can be the absolute best representative possible. Because if you have a machine and you're drinking the water and you're sharing the water, but you can't really get people to commit to buying a machine, then it's not doing its job. It can't help people if it's not in their houses. So I want to help you get those machines in people's houses so that they can experience some of the things that I've experienced and that you've experienced and that other people have experienced. And in many cases, the thing that holds people back from pulling the trigger is the representative's inability to be able to explain what's going on in factual, easy to understand, very relatable terms. So that's where we want to go. So let's get started. I want you to look at this guy and all of the words that are around him. You can see that everything from brain disorders to things with your eyes to hearts, lungs, kidneys, blood vessels, skin, immune system, joints, and multi-organ issues all have something in common. Every single one of these diseases, and I'm sure that if you go to the doctor and you sit down and fill out all those evaluation papers, and you have to list all of the pre-existing conditions that you have to list all of your family's health history, that there'll be a whole bunch of these things. And if you're my poor children, man, you got most of them between their father's side of the family and mine. They got most of these things going on somewhere back in their history. So the thing that I want you to understand is that when you fill those out for the doctor, then the doctor says, well, you have this in your genetic history, so you're predisposed to have it. And I want to share something with you tonight. I want to share that your DNA is not your destiny. It just isn't. This is so important for you to understand. Your DNA is not, whoops, not is missing. That's a pretty big blunder on my part. So we're going to have to fix that slide. But your DNA is not your destiny. Do you all remember a few years ago when Angelina Jolie decided to proactively have a radical mastectomy, and then she had her uterus removed, and she did all these things because she was trying to avoid cancer? There are ways to do that that are more simple. There really is. Because every one of these things is related. But just because they all have something in common, and just because you have them in your health history, does not mean that you need to walk down that path to that disease. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my European biological medicine training, and then you'll understand why your DNA is not your destiny. So I told a few people who were on last week that I spent so much money on my education. It was ridiculous. It was several $100,000 and lots of time and energy and effort. And kind of at the end of our course, Dr. Rao kind of distilled it down for us. And I was thinking, man, I wish you'd have said that at the beginning. It would have saved me so much time, energy, effort, and money. But anyway, just teasing. This was the important message that he delivered. He said, if you can, something's wrong with my screen. If you can create a slight shift in the pH of blood, of urine, and of saliva, so pH, and if you can reduce oxidation on the cell membrane and on the cell wall, the cell membrane, and if you can get more minerals into the cells, a body could heal itself of anything. Wow, that's a shocker, right? If you can do these three things, a body could heal itself of anything. I'm telling you, that was the magic of European biological medicine, and that's why I worked so hard to learn all of that information. Because if a body could heal itself of anything, I mean, anything is anything, right? Like, that's huge. Every single thing around, flying around that little man, that's something. And so we wanted to figure out how we could allow the body to heal itself of anything. But I want you to pay attention to the order right here. So he said, if you could create a slight shift in the pH, reduce oxidation, and get more minerals into the cells, the body could heal itself of anything. Remember when I said there were some things that were out of order? That's it. We're going to figure out what the right order is in just a minute. So here we go. Oh, I just spoke the last slide wrong. The doctors say that DNA is your destiny, but I'm telling you that DNA is not your destiny. So I guess I didn't mess up my slide after all. Just my talk. Okay. So no matter what is flying around here that you have, or that your parents had, or your grandparents had, or your sisters or your brothers, no matter what it is that's on there, that DNA is not your destiny. Because if you can create a slight shift in the pH of blood, urine, and saliva, reduce oxidation, get more minerals into cells, a body could heal itself of anything. Now, remember when I said I got the machine and I came home and I started recruiting people so I could test their blood, urine, and saliva and figure out if the machine was actually going to do anything. Like, am I going to see any results besides feeling it? Can I prove it to anybody? Got to prove it, right? I'm a doctor. So, I got Bob, who was he'd been a patient of mine for several years, and he was really a pretty good patient, like the kind who's responsive and wants to do the things you tell him. And, but he had some kind of lingering things going on. So when we tested his blood, urine, and saliva, what he did is fast for 14 hours and then come in with his first morning's urine, and I drew some blood and I got a saliva sample and I put them through this little machine that I have. And it calculated all the pH and the amount of minerals and the rate of oxidation. And it uses that rate of oxidation to calculate your biological age. So you can see right here that on 3/10 of 2005, Bob was actually 71 years old, but his biological age was 103. Big difference, right? Now, look, 3/18/2005, look what happened to his biological age. That's only 8, like he drank the water for a week, and look what happened. Now, this was back in the days of before SD501s and before the 8. This is back in the old days when there were only 5 plates. I mean, that's how long I've been around. That's the only machine that was available. And so you can see that something changed. And all these pictures down here, things were moving, things were changing that had not ever changed. And it took me some time to figure out what in the heck was going on. Like, how did that happen? How did he get so much younger so fast? And then, as I sat around and thought about it, the light bulb went off in my brain. This was all about oxidation. It had nothing to do with pH. It was all about reducing oxidation. But then I'm thinking, all right, so we got a big oxidation change. Where in the heck did that come from? How did water reduce oxidation? Because the only thing we ever talked about, or the only thing anyone ever told me about, was about pH shifts. So this is what I figured out in my light bulb moment, that oxidation was the key. That oxidation leads to dehydration, and dehydration leads to inflammation, and that inflammation is the source of every one of those things on that flying around that man. And it all begins with oxidation, because as our cells become oxidized, they don't allow enough water in. They're not properly hydrated. And as that happens, the pH changes because there's not enough fluid exchange. So the cell becomes too acidic in alkaline forming tissues and too alkaline in acid forming tissues. And that results in massive amounts of inflammation. So every single one of these things has a root in oxidation. Well, what's that got to do with water, right? I just kept thinking, what does it have to do with water? And then one day, that light bulb moment again, ionized water had to be creating some kind of an antioxidant action. It just had to be, because there was no other explanation. But, in 2005, there just wasn't much information available. So I just kept digging and digging and testing. And then I discovered this thing called an ORP meter. And I started testing to see what was happening inside that water, like what's going on. And it all made sense, because Bob, with his biological age, reducing, that was the only explanation. That's where it all got started. So we're going to go back to ionized water basics so that you can truly understand where the antioxidants come from, because this took me a while. So we're going to help you really understand it. So we're going to start with the most basic thing all of us and all of the furniture around you and your computer and your headset and everything is made out of atoms. And atoms have they have a center, and they have electrons that float around the center. And depending on how many electrons there are, the electrons and the protons and neutrons that are in the center always match in number in an atom. And so this one just happens to be oxygen, and oxygen has 8 electrons. So it has an atomic signature of 8. That's all that ever means when you see the number. That's just how many electrons it has when it's a whole atom. Okay, so there's different atoms. These are things that we normally talk about when we talk about water, so I thought it might be interesting to you to see them. So there's oxygen and fluorine and chlorine, and they all have a different number of electrons. Now, molecules are just one or more atoms that have come together. So here's a molecule of the same type. So here's H2, and we are going to talk about H2. So I'm just trying to show you good pictures so it's in your mind. So that's just 2 hydrogen that are sharing their electrons and making a molecule. And here's water. 2 H's and an O come together. So you can see that in the H, I made the electron blue, and in the O, they're green. So you can see how they're all orbiting and sharing together. So atoms are a single unit, molecules are a multi-unit, and it can be 2 or 3 or 20 or 100 or 10,000 molecules. Can have lots of different configurations, numbers of atoms and different types of atoms coming together to make something. Now, here's our good old water molecule, which is really HOH, right? It's hydrogen, oxygen, hydrogen. And we shortcut it by calling it H2O. Now, we're going to talk about ions briefly. So an ion it's an atom that lost or gained an electron. So a negatively charged ion actually has an extra electron. It stole it from somewhere, and it became negative because now there's more electrons than there are protons and neutrons in the center. So it has a negative charge, where the positive hydrogen ion lost its electron, it gave it up, and now it's a positively charged hydrogen ion because it doesn't have enough electrons. There's not an equal number of electrons in the center of the atom and in the electron shell. So I want to see if anybody has a question. If you have questions, you can type in the chat area and say, please explain that better, because I never want to just keep moving on if you really do have a question that you need to have it.
Something maybe doesn't happen.
But don't take yourself off mute to ask the question. Keep yourself muted because somebody took themselves off mute. Just type the question into the chat box. She wants to know where the chat box is. Can you help, Heather? Go ahead and unmute yourself and we'll figure that out, okay?
Yeah, okay. So to chat, you use your cursor and you go over the screen, and on the bottom of your screen, it'll have a little chat. And you just click on that, you bring it up, and you type in your question, and then it'll pop up so everybody can see your question. So I'm going to do one really quick. There we go.
So now what I see, whoops, anyway.
Yep, Debbie wrote, how do the H2 get together to create H2?
It's an electrical charge. It's just an electrical charge. And so there are different ways that, and we're going to get there in a minute. We're going to find out, I'm going to show you different ways that water splits and creates those ions, okay? But it's a good question. Just not quite there yet. I love it when people are thinking ahead. So here's how it happens. Did she give me a good segue or what? The electrolysis of water. So H2O plus electricity equals ions, atoms, and molecules, right? So as water passes through electricity, several things happen. It can split in different ways depending on where the electrons are in orbit around the oxygen in a water molecule. So when water and electricity comes together, we can get ions, we can get OH negative, we can get H positive, because as the electricity went through the water, it caused that hydrogen to get knocked out of orbit, but it left its electron behind. But we can also get O and H2, because H never lives on its own. Hydrogen is one of those elements that will never live. There will never be, except in theory, an H. There will always be an H2 or an H combined with something else. Hydrogen does not live alone. So H2 is an easy thing to happen because they have an affinity for one another. So hydrogen is very, 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 very unstable. You know about bombs, right? Hydrogen bombs. That's how they could make such a big explosion out of hydrogen, because hydrogen is really unstable. And so when you try to separate the hydrogen from each other, it creates kind of a big deal. It has to have something else it can connect to. So, and it will always find something. Hydrogen will always find something to connect to. It's just its nature. Now, here's the important thing for you to know about what happens when we have water and electricity coming together and causing this change. Ions create the pH changes. So it's the OH negative and the H positive that create the different pH balances in the water. So OH negative, which is also called a hydroxide ion, makes the water alkaline. It has nothing to do with antioxidants. It's all about alkalinity. So that OH negative, the hydroxide ion, makes the water alkaline. So the more OH negative ions we have in the water, the more alkaline it becomes. So that's how when you change the settings on your machine and you push 8 or 8.5 or 9 or 9.5, whatever it is, that's controlling the amount of electricity that's coming through the plates and into the water. That's how it determines how many water molecules are being split into hydroxide ions and hydrogen ions. The more electricity that goes through the water, the more alkaline it can become and the more acidic it can become. Okay? And that's all that when you push those buttons, that's all that's happening, is that it's changing the amount of electricity that's being introduced to the water, because the more electricity that's being introduced to the water, the more water that splits, so the more acid or alkaline you can make the water. That makes sense to everybody? If it does, you can shake your head because I can see you. Now, positively charged hydrogen ion, an H plus, makes the water really acidic. And those positively charged hydrogen ions are real go-getters. They're really great for cleaning things. They're really great for attacking things. They are scavengers for sure. And they are really useful in the whole concept of health and ionized water. Now, H2 creates antioxidants on its own. They're very specific. Antioxidants are quite specific. So different antioxidants like A, C, E, and even H2 will only mitigate a free radical or an oxidizer in a certain category. So the great thing about H2 is that it goes after some real bad guys. So in your water, when the water went through the machine and went through the electrical field and H2O split up and you got some H2, the concentration of H2 will act as an antioxidant on certain free radical scavengers. On certain really, really, really bad bad free radicals, it will act as an antioxidant. So that's one of the antioxidants that's contained in your ionized water. It's very volatile. It doesn't stay that long. It's going to, H2 loves to connect with other things. So this is why the way you drink water and when you drink your water will give you different results. Okay, and we'll talk about that as time goes on. But here's the next step of what happens inside your ionizer. And this is not true of all ionizers. This is true. Hold on, I'm going to see what question we have here. Just want to make sure. So what is the difference meaning between alkaline and alkalize? I heard alkaline is water added baking soda, alkalize is now, it's just a different tense of a word. This is the stuff that I want to make sure that we combat so that we're not making up stuff, okay? There's a different tense to the word. So don't worry about that right now. We're going to get through all this info and then we'll take some other questions and I'll help you understand that, okay? But I don't want to get too derailed here. So you know, there's a difference in machines that are out on the market. There's lots of water ionizers. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, and some of them are indifferent. And only one is really great. Okay, I've tested probably 30 or 40 different machines, and it's why I still talk about Imagix machines, because they're the only ones where you get good and consistent results. And this is why. Inside your ionizer, there are those titanium plates that are coated with platinum. And when H2 comes in contact with platinum, it freely gives up its electrons. This is how electricity is made. When you have a generation station that uses hydrogen to create electricity, the current that splits the hydrogen always has platinum with it. And so the hydrogen freely gives up its electrons, and those little electrons are conducted down a wire and you get electricity. Well, the same thing happens in water. In the Enagic unit, because of the platinum plates, when that H2 that's created, not all of it is going to come in contact with the plates, but the hydrogen, the H2 that does come in contact with the platinum plates freely gives up its electrons. Now, we're going to get to why this is so important. When all of those little electrons are floating around in your water, they are actually the ideal. I'm not talking about a good one like H2. I'm talking the ideal antioxidant. Because you know that when we talked about oxidation and we know about free radicals cause oxidation, all a free radical is an atom or a molecule that's lost an electron. And so for it to quit trying to steal electrons from someplace, all it needs is an electron. So what if when you drank water, it had a bunch of free electrons in it? And those free electrons can stop any free radical, not just a specific one like A, or not just a specific kind of free radical that E combats, or C or H2. These free electrons can mitigate any free radical. It can stop any free radical. Now, like H2, they are short-lived because they want to connect to something too. That's why it's so great when you drink water, you get those electrons right out of your machine, these little free electrons. You drink them down right that moment, and you get a flood of free electrons going to the place that they're needed the most to stop this damage from happening. Now, this is my discovery. This is what took me so long to figure out, and this is why I get so excited about it. And I actually got to see a picture of this when I was in Ireland in 2013 from an electron microscope. And I was promised a picture, but I never got it. So I don't have it to show you. The thing that I want you to understand is that this is really simple, right? This is so easy. Water, H2O, is a molecule made out of 3 atoms, 2 hydrogen and an oxygen. When you introduce electricity to H2O, it causes a split. And that split can create different things. It can create a hydroxide ion that makes the water alkaline. It can create an H plus ion that makes the water acidic. But it can also create O and H2. And H2 acts as an antioxidant on its own, but when H2 is exposed to platinum, it freely gives up its electrons and creates a whole new level of antioxidant. All right? This is so important. I mean, when I say it's so important, I can't even begin to impress upon you the importance of this information. Because if you can just take this in and look at the pictures and get it, together we really can impact the health of people all around the world, because you're actually talking about something real and something scientific that no matter who it is, from a 4th grader to a physician, they get it when you talk to them about it. You just have to keep it simple. You know that KISS theory? Keep it simple, silly. This is so important. When you explain it this way, people get it. They really get it. And this is just step 1. There's a lot more that we're going to uncover week after week after week. But really, truly, this is the most important thing to me, is that when we work together, you know, when it's just you all by yourself and you're out sharing, it's a great thing because you're helping 1 person, 2 people, 5 people, 10 people. But when we work together, we're like an avalanche, right? Or maybe we should say a tsunami, since that's more water related. We can be like the tsunami that impacts the health of people all around the world just by changing their water, just 1 glass of water at a time. Okay, now we're going to talk about our talking points, and then we're going to take some questions, okay? So here's week 1's talking points. All health issues have their root cause not in pH, but in oxidation. Remember, oxidation creates dehydration, and dehydration creates inflammation, and those create that whole host of health issues. So next week, or I think it's next week, or it might be the following week, when we talk about cells, you're going to understand this so much more. So if you can just get this really in your brain, because this is what was wrong with European biological medicine. We were all aiming at the wrong target. We were all doing everything we could to change pH. And no matter what we did, it didn't change the picture of health very much. But the minute that I added to my routine or my regimen for my patients ionized water, and those oxidation numbers started to plummet, the rate of the pH balanced, but even more than that, the hydration was balanced. They became hydrated people. Well, you know, it just took me a while to figure out why that was going on. And it really was, and you'll see when we go through the cells, oxidation creates dehydration, and dehydration creates inflammation. And this is a downward spiral of health. So we have to attack the problem at its source, which is oxidation. Lucky for you, you might not have ever known it, and maybe some of you did, and I know some of you did because some of you have been in my classes before, and a lot of you have my books. The when you start concentrating on removing the oxidation, everything changes. Everything changes. Talking point number 2. Antioxidants are the key to combating anything. Remember that slide? If you could do those 3 things, if you could, it was out of order, but his 3 points were if you could change pH, if you could remove some oxidation and you could get more minerals into a cell, a body could heal itself of anything. This is the anything. It's just that his order was wrong. And I'll tell you at a later date what happened when I did this presentation at a biological medicine conference. And it was kind of funny, but people really got it. And a lot of doctors bought machines and put them in their office. So, you know, it all worked out. But antioxidants are the key to changing that anything. Once we start with an antioxidant and we remove the oxidation and the cell becomes hydrated and minerals get into, then when the cell gets hydrated, the pH balance changes and it's perfect for whatever the pH of that cell was supposed to be when it's properly hydrated. So we remove the oxidation, the cell becomes hydrated, the pH balance is restored, and now minerals can get into the cell. And that's how a body can heal itself of anything. But you got to start with the right tool first. Now, here's number 3. H2O plus electricity equal antioxidants. Whoops. Remember that slide that had all the different things on it? So H2O plus electricity equals antioxidants. It also equals alkaline water and acid water. But the most important thing we want to concentrate on are the antioxidants. So I want to talk to you just a minute about how you drink water. And I see a lot of you online and I saw all through the years, and I tried to talk to people about it, and sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. So I want to challenge you this week. Just do it this week. Even if you go back to your old ways, I'm just going to ask you to do something different for me this week. So for those of you who work outside your home and you need to take water with you, or you're out delivering something or doing demos or whatever, and you need to take water with you, I want you to go find glass bottles that are not more than 16 ounces. And if they're dark, better. The darker the glass, the better. So the dark blue glass, really great. And when you fill that bottle up, you fill it all the way to the top. So there's no airspace. And you cap that thing. And when you are ready to drink water, you open it and you drink all of it in 20 minutes. Because then you're going to get the most antioxidants possible from your water. Because air has lots of oxidizers in it. When you open your bottle of water and there's a bunch of airspace in there, those antioxidants in the water, they don't know they're supposed to wait to get in your body to work. They're going to work on whatever oxidizers there are around. So the air that's in your bottle is going to create a loss of free electrons and H2. All the antioxidants are going to get used up, or the vast majority of them. When you share water with people that way. Share it with them in small bottles. Encourage them when they open it to drink the whole thing. So whether it's 8 ounces or 12 ounces or 16 ounces, whatever size you want, whatever size you can drink down quickly, that's the size of bottle you want. Because if you light, heat, air, and motion all make the antioxidants go away. Okay? So just for this week, just try it. I can almost guarantee you that you are going to see a difference. And if you don't, I'm going to challenge that maybe it's because you don't want to. Sometimes we get so stuck in doing something a certain way that we kind of we put our blinders on. But by testing the water in all kinds of ways with all kinds of different methods, I've been able to demonstrate that the antioxidants are gone pretty quickly when there's a lot of airspace in your bottle. Okay. So if you want to have right at your fingertips a lot of these explanations and those pretty pictures, here is one of the books. This is probably the best book on that subject of oxidation, dehydration, inflammation, and aging. I specifically wrote this for baby boomers, but it turned out to be one of the most popular books on this subject that I've written. I've written a couple of others that also will address it. This one down in the left-hand corner, If Bodies Heal Themselves, Then Why Am I Still Sick? That one it's about the same topic of oxidation and inflammation and dehydration, but from a perspective of somebody who is chronically ill. You know, they have tried everything, but their body is not healing itself. So that book really is kind of a smaller market, but really helpful for people who have chronic illness. It helps them understand why nothing that they've done has helped much. And then the one next to it, Are You Confused? The Real Story About Oxidation and Antioxidants, has a lot of good information in there, especially for all the people that you run into that say, well, you know, I'm pretty healthy. I don't think I really need that. I'm doing fine. That's a great one to share with them because there's stuff in there they don't know about. They don't know that antioxidants in fruits and vegetables and supplements actually create oxidation. And we're going to get to that on another day. But that'll be a shocker for them. So I wrote these books so that I could help you help other people. And the most successful distributors that I have helped train use the books to help explain things, because then it's not just you talking. There's some good pictures. You know what they say about pictures worth 1,000 words. And so good pictures and illustrations and something for them to read over again. And I'm always surprised at how people come to me and say, thank you so much for writing those books, because it's really helped me sell a lot of machines. And so now, for those of you who don't know this, Amanda is now my distributor. And so you can go to her site and find copies of the books and packages of the books and, use them freely. It's a great tool, and it's how I can best help you, and it'll help you get all of this stuck in your brain a little bit better as well.